Welcome to the Red Handophiles for lovers of artist Nick Cave's regular letters where he responds to fans' questions. My dad and I enjoyed the letters so much we decided to create the Red Handophiles podcast to discuss our thoughts and share it with you. You can read the Red Hand Files at www.theredhandfiles.com or follow the link in the show notes. Hello, it is episode 3 of Red Handophiles. You are with Hannah Bevan and
Adam Bevan.
And today we are looking at, I've got a double header for you, issue 205 and 206 of Nick Cave's Red Handophiles.
That's right. And for those who may not be aware, Hannah and I have just started the podcast. We're a daddy-daughter combo who used to get on the phone and have a bit of a chat about the regular or irregular sometimes newsletters, or not newsletters, letter to fans that Nick Cave did called the Red Hand Files. Go there and subscribe if you want to feed your soul with some delicious, sometimes spiritual, sometimes funny, but insights from a man who has seen the bottom and climbed to the top and shares with us his insights. Today we're doing 2 because one of them is very brief and the other one hopefully we can make brief and turn it into one, a bit like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but neither of them are going to be hopefully particularly long. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Let's start with the bigger one in order, 205. We're going back in time. So we have actually started at 207, and then when we were hoping to begin, but we had some technical issues, Nick has had a run of doing like 4 or something in about a month. So we're trying to play catch up, and Hannah lives in a different state and a different city. So while she was up here, we thought we might use the time to do a few of these. I'll start because the question comes from Jerome from Ghent in Belgium, who has asked, how come you, Nick Cave, decided to give interviews again? Now, some of these people are obviously much bigger Nick Cave followers and fans than I am, but I'm a reasonable fan and of the music. I've certainly seen him live on a handful of occasions. See him again soon, come November when Nick Cave hits Australia again for his tour. But I wasn't aware that he wasn't giving interviews, but he starts off in the poignant place of speaking about the loss of his son. He's since this lost another son to a tragic death, but his son, who was 15, I believe at the time, Arthur, he said, after Arthur died, I did an interview for a mainstream newspaper, but I felt so bad about it, so unsettled by what I said, that I vowed never to do one again. I felt completely unequipped to talk about anything, least of all the death of my son. I just didn't have the words. Now that's saying something for Nick, who is, a
wordsmith.
Yeah. So that's why he stopped giving interviews. He felt incapable. And really, I think there's some humor and a little bit of advertisement that goes on in this episode by Nick. Almost shameless, but tongue-in-cheek, but shameless. And we love it.
He's so nice.
Yeah. So he says your question became an exercise. The questions that he was getting in the Red Hand Files, where he begins to answer people's questions. Fans, this is what we're doing. We're actually just reading the responses that he's been giving to fans' questions, such as Jerome here in Belgium. And we are seeing here that he's saying answering your questions became an exercise in how to and what to believe. I was able to construct a worldview based on intimacy, vulnerability, uncertainty, and commonality. So he's starting to say here that through the Red Hand Files, this is the first piece, this commonality, this connection, being vulnerable together, is obviously the beginnings. So then we move on to the next bit. Do you want to go from there, Hannah? I guess it's really the connection to Sean you might want to talk about and what happened. Or maybe I was off on my own, my own big idea. Let me follow down my own thought channel here a little bit, shall I? So he goes from this place of starting the Red Hand Files some 4 years ago, and begins to find some meaning and construct. But he's still not at the place of doing interviews, and he meets up regularly at shows and concert and other events with Sean O'Hagan, who is an Irish journalist. I don't know anything about him other than he writes for The Journalist, and he had a lot of conversations with Nick. And this is where it got a little bit fascinating. Was there anything there in his thoughts on the conversations that he'd been having with Sean O'Hagan?
Well, interestingly, he said, I always enjoyed talking to him, mostly because we tended to clash on certain issues.
Right.
So immediately you're like, oh, what's going on here? That's not a typical reason why we like to chat with people so we can clash with them.
It's like, I like that idea too. I'm also a Democrat or a voter of this or a hater of that or a vegan or a hunter, Yeah.
We seek people that share our own experiences, our own worldviews. So I was like, wow, that's already in my head. I'm going like opening ideas in my mind about.
Yeah. Enjoying. And I think it's because of the respect they had for each other's ideas. They're probably both eloquent. One's a journalist. One's a prolific artist who's a writer and a thinking human. And so respectfully they meet. And he said that the bit I underlined where he said they tend to clash on certain issues, he said that I liked the friction, and on the other side of our disagreement, we found good faith conversation. And with that conversation, a rich seam of common interests and fascinations. We as humans have more in common than, we have that separates us, and yet we spend all of our energy sometimes in the differences. And here Nick was experiencing joy and no doubt learning in the friction, but it's probably more about the way they went about it.
Yeah. The respect in differences.
And actually spending some of the energy listening rather than being concrete in your already formed, well-loved, well-worn ideas. So I don't think we need to say much other than he began from that process to get to a place where he says they decided through these common interests to build a book. And that book, which, to be honest, I mean, here I am with this podcast with my daughter. Haven't read the book. I will, and perhaps Hannah and I will both read it and do a podcast.
We'll do some homework for you guys.
We'll do some homework. Yeah, and he says that he learned how to speak into another person's concerns and differing position on things, and I think through that, he basically just goes on to say, I found a way to do interviews again. I found myself, and I found in all the differences these connections that...
May I say in it, though, that the ultimate desire in it is being heard. And I think that Sean, although his opinions may differ, they would hear each other's concerns, and that's it. Just sit with being able to truly hear someone. Because what often happens is people are listening, and what they're waiting for is their rebuttal on the other side. They're prepping, they're not listening, they're prepping their words before. But when you really listen to what someone has to say, you hear their story, you hear who they are, you see them.
Yeah, and if you come into the meeting with an open heart to learn and be ready to let go or modify ideas and receive new ideas that might even radically change your view on something. We're so at war with ideas and people, and we're just not ready to listen. You know, it's so easy to say, you know, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, or you're a liberal voter, or you're different to me. You're a Muslim and I'm a Christian, or these binary differences as we present them. When we come into the grand middle and say, well, we're human, we experience the human condition together, and we might have some differing beliefs, but that center, we find it so hard to respectfully receive each other's differences. And these people have got to a book out of it, which is the fun part of this. Which was there anything that you found funny in this episode of his letters to fans and this question about interviewing again?
Well, I loved the blatant plug. If you're gonna do it, just do it in my face. He does say, and before this post becomes just a plug for the book, and I go, yeah, own it.
Yeah,
I appreciate.
Before it becomes a plug for the book.
Yeah. I appreciate
I'm
it.
going to say something here that's not a plug, or is it? What does he say?
What does he say? Let me share what the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, has said about it. This is his book. It's still a plug.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
An absolutely wonderful book. I don't think I've ever read so integrated and searching an engagement with how faith works, how creativity works, and how grief is bound up with both. And that got me. I was like, I'm getting it.
I'm getting the book.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it. That's it. Why is Nick Cave interviewing again? Because he got lost for words through the Red Hand Files, which is why we've been inspired by the Red Hand Files. We do the Red Handophiles, lovers of the Red Hand Files. We see somebody who learnt how to have meaning and communicate again and find the words. Maybe the modes were different, but we're grateful that he did. Isn't that amazing? You stop giving interviews, and through that process, he's unearthed something higher.
And finding differences.
Speaking of differences, maybe we can jump to the
just the segue I was thinking as well.
Yeah. So the next Red Hand Files was also like a week and a half ago. It was issue 206. If you go to the Red Hand Files website, you'll be able to read it, but I can read it pretty shortly. And this one's interesting because I might read the whole statement here, and maybe we should just read this one, Hannah, and talk about the whole thing because it's so short. Solmaz from London in the United Kingdom. As one of your most consistent supporters who's followed every artistic move that you've made, I can't read your new book or letters. I can't look at your social media, and I can't even listen to your music, something I have always done since I know myself. We have been supporting you all the way, in good and bad, but your silence left us feel alone. I know you don't need mine or my fellow Iranian support, but for now, with all sadness, I step back. Do you want to read the response and then we can just quickly talk about it?
He writes, Dear Solmaz, the Iranian people have been in my thoughts throughout the protests that have followed the killing of Mahsa Amini. I fully support the brave women of Iran who are fighting and dying on the streets for their basic freedom and dignity, and for the men who stand with them. I am in awe of their courage and pray for their safety. With much love, Nick. This, when I first read it, knowing that we were going to start discussing it, made me shudder with fear. Because I've made a bit of a conscious effort in the last few years to turn away from news. I found it very fear-mongering and sensationalist, and my life actually just dramatically improved once I started switching off and going in.
Well, then it was the right decision.
Yeah, going within the mind.
Let the world do what the world does.
Yeah. My world continues spinning because the news doesn't really have so much of an impact on my day-to-day. However, so I was like, what am I going to say about this? I don't want people to know that I'm not watching the news, not keeping up to date with it. It's sort of like my little hidden secret of mine, my little like secret tool to happiness that I've got for myself. But in reading it, I've been doing lots of reflecting as well. And where is that line of keeping ourselves informed and standing up for vulnerable communities and vulnerable people and making ourselves vulnerable? And that's starting to affect our day-to-day lives. Where's that line between where we can help and where we start sacrificing ourselves? And with Nick's response, he can't speak on the issue. It's not his fight to be had. It's not his opinions that need to be heard. However, he has given the space in this answer for Solmaz's concerns to be heard, how very, very important it is for humans to be heard, as we've just talked about. I actually think they led into each other beautifully. She's heard and she's seen by Nick, but it is not his fight to be had, nor is it yours or mine, but it is really, really important to acknowledge people's struggles and to acknowledge what they're fighting for.
I see an act of kindness from Nick towards his fan. He's left this venue of letters and responses open, and it's quite extraordinary to me that somebody was there wanting him to make some comment that made them feel included, like, oh, you're not including us Iranian people. And he might have been there, he's just putting out a letter with some irregularity. He's maybe he's talking about it to people and saying, oh yeah, gee, they're really brave and courageous, or thinking it, but not. He's writing a letter and he's touring and he's writing books and he's hustling. He's busy, and it's quite an insight for me that some people are looking. There's a song where from Grinder Man with No Pussy Blues, where he says, it says something like, talking about the crowd, he's looking at the crowd and he speaks about with their questioning eyes, like looking up at him with their questioning eyes. And this is pointing to that in a way that when you're in the limelight and you've made yourself accessible, you're guilty of sometimes things that you don't even realize. But rather than saying, not responding, he's kind of gone, oh, okay, I didn't realize that I had offended you, but I want you to know these people, the women and the men who are on the ground with this fight, and those who are Iranian and those who back them and those who choose this fight to get involved, I stand with you. You're in my thoughts and prayers and the other things he's expressed. But yeah, people really needed that solidarity. And this person was so hurt because they're such a big fan. They were waiting for him to say something. And I hope for our fellow Red Handophile, Solmaz in London, who's obviously of an Iranian background, that this has been enough, that it's not an apology, it's just a matter of fact to him saying, oh, let me be clear that I think these people are amazing and brave and I stand with that. And I love that he reached out, that he said, oh, here's a moment to heal something. And might we all do that? Might we take these two ideas with Solmaz? I didn't realize that it was hurting you, but I'm here. I might not be on the front line, but I can't be on the front line of everything. All right. And as with his conversations with Shauna Hagen, that he found in their differences, in all that friction, that they could meet in the middle. And that's what I think was a good thing about putting these two together, is there's this idea about he's done it right here. What he demonstrated with Sean, he's demonstrated to somebody whose nose got a little bit out of joint and felt, maybe it wasn't that hard, but they felt hurt. They felt like he should be hearing and seeing and listening. And upon saying that, he said, okay, well, I hear you and I'm going to publish this. And now we're talking about it, but it's both of these are beautiful. Let us take our differences, and even sometimes when we've got to go to war with certain things, like what's happening on the streets of Iran, which I'm not talking about the details of that now. If you're not sure what's happened there and you're interested, go and look it up, see what's happened. Just to reach out and in the differences and find understanding, and there's healing there. Anything else you want to add from your side, Hannah?
I don't know. I still feel a bit of discomfort around it, to be honest.
Around?
Maybe a little bit your response.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I feel like the purpose of this one was maybe to give airspace to the plight of Iranian women right now and to give recognition to it. And maybe I feel like you've moved it into this kind of softer, gentler space because it's loud and it's violent and it's...
Yeah, maybe.
But maybe that's the beauty of our last conversation about it. But how painful the words were that she had and the gentleness was it, was I think him stepping aside and saying, Solmaz, say your piece. Let me give you the voice that I cannot give to this issue right now. That was my personal take on it, because as people not involved in this fight, but with enormous privilege, enormous voices, like I honestly, do you know what? I almost shamefully wouldn't know enough on this topic if I wasn't having to do a little bit right here, right now before. But no, it is important to know these things. And that's what he's given. He's given it the space for me to reflect on what Solmaz has had to say. His words have had little effect, but I am thinking about Solmaz's here. And yeah, as a place of, like you and I, in places of privilege, we have our freedoms, we have all of these things. It's important for us to acknowledge people that don't have those.
Which I think he's done beautifully and softly. But I've almost found this more of a, Nick, a one-to-one rather than the broader issue. Like, you need some acknowledgement. I think I'm talking about his meeting them with their need, and also saying, by the way, I think those people are amazing. I don't watch the news either. You know, my TV almost never goes on. I feel way too busy or self-absorbed in, busyness, and my life feels better mostly for not watching the news too. I completely resonate with that. That's me. But
I don't know if it's a fine line to toe with that. I don't. It's actually something I'm still grappling with in my own life.
Fair enough.
And it's brought it all up maybe with Solmaz's message. It's brought some own things that I need to grapple with.
Okay.
About my relationship with media and news and where empathy needs to start and begin.
Yeah. In the end, those people, any people in a large or small revolutionary position, face amazing odds sometimes, and they go out bravely, and they may or may not win. I'm not talking specifically about this, but just in general. But the bravery, it's amazing. But for me, it's interesting because it didn't bring that up for me. I got sent something that I saw, some of the fuss that was going on the streets of Iran, and a friend sent it to me, and I said, "Where's that?" And he said, "Don't you know? You live under a rock." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, it's in Iran." And I was like, "Wow, what's it about?" And he spoke about, the young lady who lost her life because of the what do they call it? The
modesty laws in Iran.
Yeah, that's right.
She wasn't wearing her hijab properly.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I really haven't given much more to it, and I wondered whether Nick was in a similar situation, or whether he watches more TV than I do, or news. But for me, it was more about his gentle response. I like that. Oh, okay. I just want to acknowledge that because I didn't say anything, it wasn't absent. And right now, for you and everybody else's benefit, I think these people are brave and amazing. And so it's interesting that we had two different emotional or
interpretations.
And I wonder how our people watching, maybe we might have a subscriber or two by the time this goes out. I wonder how they have. Leave your comments. We'd be happy to know, and get some feedback yourselves, whether you care, or whether you think we should all be in some kind of action around of this. For me, it was just the response of a artist to their fan that I was taken with. I didn't really engage much in the actual issue itself. And the same with Sean. I think it was this idea of tying in that people have collaborated together because of all of their different ideas. How to be able to live together happily, using the resources of our individual ideas that are different, sometimes glaringly different, and come to friendship. That's amazing, and that's a goal worth seeking, as far as I'm concerned. Well, might be a good place to wrap it up. Thank you all for having a listen. Like, subscribe, and all those other things, and leave your comments.
All right.
Catch you for the next one.
See you next time.